Have you ever shared your life with someone who turned out to be living a second life behind your back, yet made you feel like you were the one not paying attention? My name is Cole Harrison. I'm 48 years old and I work in cybersecurity where my job is to notice what others overlook. Tiny discrepancies, hidden vulnerabilities, quiet signals of something wrong. It's ironic, really. I built my career spotting digital threats, yet I missed the most dangerous breach of all. The woman I trusted with everything. The moment it all came crashing down wasn't loud or dramatic. It came as a video message. Elena, my wife of 17 years, smiling from a luxury suite I'd never seen, holding a glass of champagne and wearing a bracelet I'd never bought. Her voice, calm. Her words, calculated. I've moved on, Cole, and I've moved the money too. That video didn't break me. It confirmed what I had already begun to suspect and prepare for. Because what Elena didn't know was that I'd already set the trap, quietly, legally, carefully. This isn't the story of a man blindsided by betrayal. It's the story of how I stayed 10 steps ahead, without ever raising my voice. I watched that 42-second video 3 times in silence. Not out of disbelief, but because I wanted to observe every detail. The room's decor, the brand of champagne, the angle of light on the bracelet. As Elena turned the camera toward the man standing in the background, shirtless, holding 2 flutes, something in me settled, not shattered. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel heartbreak. I felt clarity. It was the kind of clarity that arrives only when the fog of denial has finally lifted. She had told me she was going to a wellness retreat in Sedona. I remember nodding, even offering to drive her to the airport. She declined, of course, said she was carpooling with a colleague. But that video wasn't filmed in Sedona. I traced the hotel decor, matched it online. It was a private penthouse, suite in a boutique resort in Tulum. Not exactly a yoga and journaling escape. What struck me wasn't just the betrayal. It was the smugness. The way she tilted her head with performative sympathy. The way she ended the message. You'll be fine, Cole. You always land on your feet. I have too. As if she expected me to admire her courage or thank her for her honesty. I set the phone down and looked around our home. The modern chairs, the open shelving, the designer fixtures she'd insisted on during the last renovation. All hers in taste. None of it mine. I realized then that I'd been living inside someone else's vision of a life. I'd paid for it, built it, protected it, but it had never really belonged to me. In that moment, I didn't call her. I didn't call anyone. I stood up, walked into my office and opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. Inside was a black folder labeled Contingency. Not dramatic, just thorough. It contained printed bank statements, screenshots of suspicious charges, copies of messages she thought she'd deleted. I'd been building it for nearly 6 months. Not because I was paranoid, because I saw the signs. It had started with small things, text messages from unknown contacts that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in years. New pieces of jewelry with no explanation. Credit card charges at restaurants in Dallas when she'd claimed she was on overnight calls with the California sales team. I didn't accuse. I didn't confront. I observed. It was the bracelet that confirmed everything. A Cartier diamond tennis bracelet, retail price over $15,000. I had never bought her anything close to that. And she wore it proudly in the video, flaunting it like a trophy. She believed she had won, that I was passive, distracted, and unaware. But what Elena had never understood, what most people never really understood about me, was that I didn't need to yell to make an impact. I don't react. I study. I document. I prepare. And this time, I had prepared for everything. While she thought I was too busy with cybersecurity contracts and late-night client calls, I had been quietly restructuring our finances. Every document she signed without reading had moved assets further from her reach. Every passive agreement she made, trusting me to handle the boring stuff, was a safeguard I'd built not just for our future, but in case she ever decided to destroy it. That moment, Watching the video was not the beginning of the end. It was the confirmation that the end had already happened. She just hadn't realized that I had accepted it long before she did. I watched the video one final time, paused it on the frame where she laughed, triumphant, cruel, oblivious, and then I deleted it from my phone. Not out of emotion. I had already saved it to 3 different encrypted drives, time-stamped and indexed, because this wasn't a relationship anymore. It was now a case file. Elena and I met when we were both 30. She was magnetic from the start, sharp, elegant, always composed like someone accustomed to being watched. I met her at a healthcare tech conference in Denver. She was working for a medical device company, leading their expansion into Latin America. I was giving a keynote on data infrastructure and health systems. We ended up sitting next to each other at the networking dinner. She complimented my tie. I made a dry comment about the wine being overpriced and mediocre. She laughed, and that laugh would stay with me for years. We moved fast. Too fast, maybe. Within 6 months, we were living together in Austin. She brought warmth, energy, and a kind of glossy charisma that made people remember her. I brought structure, financial security, and predictability. "You ground me," she used to say, curling into me on the couch with a glass of red wine in her hand. "You're the spine. I'm the skin." Back then, I believed in that balance. I thought the fact that we were opposites gave us strength. She made me more social, more present. I helped her slow down, plan, think through things. It worked for a while. The cracks appeared slowly. First, in our day-to-day rhythm. Elena wanted more dinners out, more weekends away, more expensive furniture and designer art. I didn't resist outright. I just absorbed it, adapted, adjusted spreadsheets. The more she spent, the harder I worked. I convinced myself that this was love expressed as support. Then came the social climbing. She joined committees, started hosting lavish parties for her colleagues and industry leaders. I found myself in rooms full of people who barely acknowledged me, except to ask what I did, while looking past me for someone more interesting. I smiled politely, refilled drinks, and quietly counted the cost of each bottle of wine. Still, I let it slide. I told myself that relationships evolve, that seasons change, that maybe this was just her growing into who she was meant to be. It was 5 years ago that I saw the first real fracture, a $4,200 charge at a boutique hotel in Scottsdale. It wasn't during any trip I remembered us taking. When I asked, she said it was a work retreat. She sounded tired, defensive, like I'd insulted her integrity by even asking. I let it go. I told myself I was overreacting. I had no proof, just a growing sense of unease. The second came 2 years later. I found a new phone bill, separate from our shared plan. I asked about it casually. She blinked once and said, "Oh, just something for work. They require a separate device now." It didn't make sense, but I didn't push. Instead, I took that as the point where I stopped assuming everything would make sense. I began keeping small records, not because I planned to use them, not yet, but because a part of me that had always trusted her was starting to prepare for what I didn't want to admit. Looking back now, I see that the marriage I believed in was based more on illusion than reality. She had loved the structure I gave her, the safety, the image of success, but not me. Not really. She loved the lifestyle, the reputation. I was a reliable provider, a background figure in the life she was curating for herself. And I had convinced myself that this was enough, that being needed financially was a kind of emotional validation. What I didn't understand then, but do now, is that some people don't want partners. They want platforms. And I had become hers. She was crafting a narrative for the world. I was simply part of the set design, supportive, silent, steady, until I stopped being silent, until I started watching, and in watching I began to see that the woman I'd built a life with had quietly started dismantling it. One forged receipt, one fake smile, one withheld truth at a time. But the thing about illusions is, they only work as long as no one questions them, and I had begun to question everything. Once I allowed myself to stop rationalizing her behavior, everything shifted. The clues that once seemed disconnected began to form a pattern. Elena wasn't careless, she was calculated. And the more I watched, the more I realized her betrayals weren't impulsive. They were layered, deliberate, and timed. It started with her weekend trips. At first, they were rare: conferences, client meetings, networking events. But gradually they became more frequent and less consistent. She'd say she was going to Houston for a medical summit, but I'd notice her using a rideshare app at the Austin airport, flying somewhere entirely different. Once, she claimed she was visiting a cousin in San Diego, but her location history, which synced to our shared family tablet, showed she was in Miami. That was when I started documenting everything, not as a husband nursing paranoia, but as a professional gathering intelligence. I wasn't going to confront her with half-truths. I wanted a full picture, one that could stand up in court if it had to. I archived her emails, mirrored her phone backups using software she never knew I had access to. I cross-referenced bank charges, searched property registries, tracked Venmo transfers. And slowly, a name kept surfacing: Sebastian Knox. The first time I saw it was in a payment description: Knox Consulting Reimbursement. That seemed odd. Elena didn't consult anyone, and she didn't work on reimbursement-based projects. Then I saw it again in a hotel reservation under her rewards account. Mr. Knox listed as an additional guest. I ran a deep background check. Sebastian Knox didn't have much of a digital footprint. No LinkedIn, no clear work history. The only reference I could find was a brief appearance in a trade conference photo from 2 years earlier, standing next to a different woman who, I later discovered, had gone through a divorce 6 months after that event. I didn't confront Elena. I couldn't. Not yet. She was careful, but the digital inconsistencies were mounting. She had begun withdrawing small amounts of cash from our joint account, just below notification thresholds: $480, $950, $990, just enough to stay under radar, but frequent enough to raise mine. She told me it was retail therapy, a way to deal with stress. I said nothing, but I took action. First, I contacted Patrice Nguyen, a forensic financial investigator I'd met during a cybersecurity seminar. Discreet, thorough, and relentless. I explained my situation without embellishment. She agreed to help, on the condition that we keep things airtight and within the boundaries of legality. Then I started securing my position. I created a new trust under my consulting firm's umbrella. The trust was registered in Delaware, legally sound, and practically invisible to anyone without clearance. I began redirecting all new contract income into that trust, shielding it from marital access. Then I restructured our retirement assets. Elena and I had a joint 401k that I managed. I initiated a rollover, moving 70% of it into a private retirement vehicle she had signed off on during a batch of tax documents the previous fall. She never read what she signed. She just asked, "Are we good?" I nodded. I also began reviewing the title of our shared assets. The house, 2 vehicles, a lakefront cabin we barely used. I shifted the property tax notices to be sent to my private P.O. box. Quiet moves. Nothing illegal. Just smarter positioning. Elena, meanwhile, seemed to grow bolder. She bought new handbags, luxury brands I knew her salary wouldn't justify. She began investing in coaching programs, claiming they were necessary for work. When I asked about the $6,000 charge to an account listed in Switzerland, she smiled and said, "You don't need to worry about that. It's covered by my company." It wasn't. That night, I pulled up our joint retirement account and saw the beneficiary field had been changed. My name was still there, but another had been added: Sebastian Knox. It was the final straw. The next day, I went to my attorney. I didn't file for divorce yet. I wanted more evidence. But I started the process. I gave him the documentation Patrice and I had compiled. He looked through it slowly, then looked up and said, "This isn't just a betrayal. This is financial fraud." We agreed to wait. Timing would matter. I needed to let her make one more mistake. one that crossed the line in a way the law couldn't ignore. And based on everything I'd gathered, that moment was coming soon, because Elena was no longer hiding what she was doing. She was testing how far she could go before I noticed. What she didn't realize was, I already had. I just wasn't ready to stop her yet. I was preparing to end it on my terms. And when it came, it wouldn't be with screaming or begging. It would be with silence, strategy, and receipts. It happened on a Friday afternoon, just before a long holiday weekend. Strategic timing if your goal is to avoid detection until banks reopen. But she underestimated the one person in her life trained to see patterns that others miss. I was at my home office, finalizing a systems audit report, when I received a flagged alert from our joint retirement account. A withdrawal request had been submitted, $162,000, all of it directed toward a private brokerage in New York under the name S-Knox Holdings. The system registered the authorization as complete. My name was listed on the signature line. Except, I hadn't signed anything. I called the bank immediately and asked to speak to the fraud department. Within 5 minutes, a manager was on the line. "Sir," she said carefully, "the transaction has been marked high priority due to the amount. It will clear by close of business unless both account holders confirm it's unauthorized." "I do not authorize this transfer," I said, steady and calm. "And I believe the signature on file has been forged." That was enough. The process froze. The investigation began. I hung up, opened my encrypted folder labeled Phase 2, and drafted 2 emails. One to my lawyer, attaching the fraudulent documents. The other to Patrice, asking her to compile the updated financial trace into a formal report. The machine had been set in motion. Now it was time to let it run. Elena texted me that evening. "We need to talk. Can I come by?" I waited 2 minutes before replying. "Sure, I'm home." She arrived 30 minutes later, composed as ever. Designer jeans, heels, a silk blouse, minimal makeup, but something in her expression was off. She didn't look like someone in control. She looked like someone rehearsing confidence. "Hey," she said, breezing past me into the living room, like it was any normal day. "I was thinking we should revisit our long-term finances. There have been a lot of changes lately." I said nothing, just watched her perform. She paced slowly, then stopped near the kitchen island. "I might have done something impulsive," she admitted, forcing a laugh. "But it's all fixable. We can talk about it, right?" I walked to the bar cart and poured myself a glass of water. "What did you do, Elena?" She flinched at the directness. "I moved some funds. Look, it's complicated. I thought you were checked out. You're always buried in work. I needed something for me." I raised an eyebrow. "So you forged my signature to empty our retirement account? That's your version of self-care?" She froze. The mask cracked for a second. "You can't prove that." "Actually," I said, placing my phone on the counter, "the bank already has the documents under review. They've also been forwarded to my lawyer who specializes in financial misconduct." She tried to pivot. "It was Sebastian's idea. He said we could reinvest the money and get ahead. It was temporary." I stared at her, not angry, just finished. "You stole from me, Elena. You lied, forged, and collaborated with someone to take what we built over nearly 2 decades. You're being dramatic," she snapped. "This is a misunderstanding." "No," I said quietly. "This is a consequence." Her posture shifted from defensive to pleading. "Cole, we can fix this. We've built a life. You need me." I stepped back. "I needed honesty. You gave me paperwork and a scam artist." She tried to touch my arm. I stepped away. "Elena," I said calmly, "as of this morning, I've filed for divorce. The papers will be served Monday. I've secured all financial assets under legal protection. The fraud report is in motion, and everything you've done in the last 6 months has been documented." There was a beat of silence. Then she laughed. Short, bitter, strained. "You're bluffing." I opened the laptop on the kitchen counter and showed her a PDF folder labeled Marital Fraud, Elena H. Inside, banking records, chat logs, Her fake signature, video clips, even the signed change of beneficiary form with Sebastian's name, her face drained of color. "You planned this?" she whispered. "I protected myself," I replied, "because I saw who you were becoming long before you showed me the full version." She turned cold then. The sweetness evaporated. "You'll regret this. Sebastian has resources. He knows. Lawyers. People with real power." "Then you're welcome to walk into battle with him," I said. "But you'll be doing it without access to our accounts, our assets, or my silence." She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the framed photo from our wedding. I left it on the floor. The next morning, I changed every password: banking, cloud storage, utilities, even the door lock code. I notified our mortgage servicer, flagged our insurance policies, and updated emergency contacts. Quietly, without ceremony, I began to erase her from every system she once had access to. The only place she remained was in the legal file. And that would soon be resolved. What she hadn't understood was that betrayal doesn't begin with the moment someone walks away. It begins with the moment they stop seeing you as real. And that was her mistake. Because I'd never stopped seeing everything. The Monday after Elena's visit, my lawyer Daniel and I met in his office to finalize the divorce filing. His assistant had already compiled the necessary documents, but what we now had was far more than grounds for divorce. We had evidence, irrefutable, methodical, and damning. Daniel flipped through the dossier Patrice Nguyen had assembled page by page, nodding as he read. "This is more than marital misconduct," he said at last. "We're looking at coordinated financial fraud, possibly conspiracy, definitely identity forgery." I leaned back in the chair, quiet, controlled. And it gets worse. That morning, Patrice had sent me a new report. After weeks of silent tracing, she had uncovered the true identity behind Sebastian Knox. That wasn't his real name. His legal name was Derek Vaughn, 43 years old, no college degree, multiple aliases across state lines, and a trail of shattered lives behind him. Patrice found 2 prior cases, almost identical in structure. Both involved recently divorced or emotionally distant married women. Both women worked in healthcare-related sales. Both had been involved with Sebastian and had moved significant amounts of money into offshore investment accounts before their marriages collapsed. In both cases, Derek vanished just as legal troubles caught up with the women. And now, Elena was his third. Patrice included screenshots of financial transfers from Elena's personal and joint accounts, $117,000 in total, sent over 8 months. Some marked as business investment, others under shell companies linked to Vaughn's former aliases. One transfer was listed simply as Knox Futures in the Cayman Islands. I forwarded everything to Daniel. "I want to pursue criminal action," I told him. "Not just divorce. This man targets women, manipulates them into stealing, then disappears. Elena may be complicit, but he's the constant in every pattern." Daniel nodded. "We'll need to proceed carefully. There's precedent for this kind of case, but we'll have to get the district attorney involved, and the other women. If they're willing to testify, it becomes a pattern, a predatory one." Later that day, I contacted Patrice and asked her to locate the prior victims. Within 48 hours, she put me in touch with both. One lived in Arizona, the other in North Carolina. Both had divorced under financial strain. Both had sent large sums of money to shell entities now linked to Derek Vaughn, and both were willing to talk. We set up a video call, 3 people who had never met, but whose lives had been bruised by the same invisible hand. They described the same charm, the same smooth voice, the same seductive talk of building a future together. He always appeared successful, claimed he was an investor and entrepreneur with big plans. But he never left a digital trace. He used burner phones, kept travel minimal, and never stayed in one place longer than a few months. "He never asked for money directly," one of them said. "He made you feel like you were contributing to something shared. He'd say things like, 'We'll both win, but I need your trust.' And I gave it." It was chilling how perfectly the pattern matched Elena's behavior. Only this time the paper trail was cleaner, sharper. because I had documented it all in real time. I gave Daniel the go-ahead to initiate formal charges. He contacted the district attorney and sent the files. Within days, the DA's office opened an investigation. The fraud division at our bank also escalated the case. The name Derek Vaughn triggered an internal flag from a past client alert. Things were finally moving. Meanwhile, I filed a motion with the court to freeze all joint marital assets. I included the evidence of fraud, forged documentation, and financial misconduct. The judge approved the motion the same week. Elena, now cut off from both access and control, was about to understand just how much damage she had allowed, if not outright enabled. That Thursday, I received a voicemail from her. "You need to talk to me," she said, her voice thinner, more strained than I'd ever heard it. I didn't know. I didn't know who he really was, please. I think I made a terrible mistake. I didn't respond, not directly. I forwarded the message to Daniel and Patrice. Documentation was everything now. 2 days later, Elena showed up at my office building. Security called me from the front desk. She says she's your wife. Soon to be ex, I replied, but yes, I'll come down. I found her waiting in the lobby wearing a black trench coat, hair pulled back, eyes red. She looked like a woman on the verge of collapse. "He lied to me," she said as soon as I approached. "About everything. I just got off the phone with one of his exes. He told her the same stories, same plans." I nodded. "And you believed him enough to try and steal our future?" "I thought it was an opportunity," she whispered. "A way out. You were so distant. I felt like I didn't matter anymore." I stared at her. "So you replaced me with a con man and signed away our life?" "I was wrong," she said, trembling. "But I didn't know, I swear." "That's not for me to decide anymore," I said. "The bank, the court, the DA, they'll decide." She looked down. "I've lost everything." "No," I corrected. "You gave it away." I walked past her, left her standing in the sterile lobby surrounded by strangers. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt resolved, because this wasn't just my story anymore. This was about something bigger, a pattern of financial predators manipulating their way through people's lives. And if I could help bring one of them down, even partially, then none of this had been in vain. That night, Patrice called me. "I've just confirmed a fourth victim. Derek used a variation of his alias and ran the same scheme. She's in California, and she's furious." "Let's bring her in," I said. It was time to stop playing defense, and time to turn this into a case that wouldn't just end with a divorce, but with a reckoning. The legal momentum built quickly. Within 10 days of submitting the full evidence package, Daniel received a response from the district attorney's office. They were moving forward with a formal investigation into Derek Vaughn, alias Sebastian Knox, under charges of financial fraud, identity falsification, and possible racketeering. The inclusion of 4 separate victims across 3 states painted a picture that was no longer just personal. It was systemic. Daniel and I sat across from the assistant district attorney, a woman named Jessica Lynn, who had prosecuted multiple white-collar crimes. As she flipped through the dossier we'd assembled, she paused, often eyebrows tightening. "This man is good," she muttered, "but not good enough. He's sloppy in just the right places. Makes it emotional, not professional. That's where we'll catch him." I knew what she meant. Derek, or Sebastian, or whatever he called himself now, wasn't running a tech scam. He was running a human one, manipulating trust, twisting emotion, and weaponizing relationships into financial pipelines. Meanwhile, our civil case was gaining traction. The judge granted an injunction freezing all accounts previously accessible by Elena, including joint savings, property equity draws, and investment portfolios. Daniel filed a motion to reassign legal ownership of the assets that had been fraudulently redirected under false pretenses. Elena's access was revoked, and the court appointed a forensic accountant, our own Patrice Nguyen, as a third-party verifier. At the initial court hearing, Elena showed up wearing a navy suit and a face stripped of the usual confidence. Her lawyer, A polished man in his early 40s stood beside her with rehearsed calm. They tried to argue that she had no knowledge of the fraud, that she had been misled, manipulated, emotionally exploited. It was a predictable defense, but the evidence told a different story. Daniel stood and with deliberate pace presented our evidence. Timelines of bank transfers, metadata from the forged documents, screen captures of Elena's encrypted conversations with Derek, and the video she herself had recorded, smiling, announcing the liquidation of our retirement account, her glass raised like a queen at a coronation. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a long history of ruling on financial abuse cases, wasn't impressed by Elena's attorney's theatrics. After the evidence was presented, she leaned forward, hands clasped. "Mrs. Harrison, you claim ignorance. And yet we have proof you personally submitted documentation using a falsified signature, initiated bank transfers beyond legal thresholds, and changed beneficiary details without authorization. Regardless of intent, these are serious violations. This court takes a very dim view of weaponized financial manipulation within a marriage." Elena said nothing. Her lips tightened, but she didn't argue. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jessica Lynn entered a motion to submit the DA's findings to the civil court. Included was an affidavit from another victim, a woman from California who had recently filed a separate police report. In her statement, she claimed that Derek Vaughn had once bragged, "I know how to make a woman ruin her own life. She just has to believe I'm the exit door." It hit like a thunderclap. The judge ordered immediate asset protection, no sale, transfer, or liquidation of any jointly acquired property. And more importantly, she opened the door for criminal proceedings, to run parallel to the divorce case. I watched Elena's lawyer lean in to whisper something urgent in her ear. Her face paled, and for a moment her shoulders curled forward, like she was finally feeling the full weight of what she'd helped build and what it was now collapsing onto. After the hearing, Daniel and I stepped into a quiet corridor outside the courtroom. "This is shifting," he said. "With the other victims cooperating and the criminal investigation escalating, we could not only recover the funds, but set a precedent. This kind of emotional financial abuse has flown under the radar for too long." He was right. This wasn't just about a bitter breakup anymore. This was about predators who didn't need ski masks or weapons. They used charm, digital accounts, and false intimacy. And they left behind no bruises, only shattered credit, drained bank accounts, and a trail of quietly humiliated victims. That week, I gave full access to my files to the DA's office. Patrice provided a complete money map, every dollar that had moved, every account it touched, and the entities used to cover the trail. It was surgical, clean, devastating. Elena's lawyer reached out 2 days later with a proposed settlement. They wanted to negotiate quickly, divvy up assets, avoid further damage. But Daniel declined. "We're not interested in compromise," he replied. "We're interested in consequences." At home, I began preparing for what came next, not emotionally but logistically. I boxed up Elena's remaining belongings, changed the locks, the utilities, the insurance policies. I updated the estate plan, rewrote the will, and shifted every legal document into the protection of my trust. Elena sent a single message during that time. "I didn't mean for this to happen." I didn't reply, because she had meant for something to happen, something that benefited her and buried me. What she hadn't anticipated was that I had built my life not just to grow, but to defend, quietly, methodically. And now, the same systems I'd built to protect my clients were protecting me, from the woman I once trusted and the man who taught her how to lie. The reckoning wasn't loud. It was deliberate, and it had only just begun. 6 months after that courtroom reckoning, the dust finally settled. The divorce was finalized, and with the court's ruling, I retained control of nearly all our marital assets. Elena was ordered to make restitution payments for the funds she had illegally redirected, though we both knew it would take years, if not decades, for her to pay it all back. She avoided prison time, but not disgrace. Her professional reputation in the medical Sales industry had been irreparably damaged. Last I heard, she had moved back in with her sister in Portland, working as a lower-tier regional rep for a small supplier. Derek Vaughn, on the other hand, didn't escape so easily. With the testimonies of 4 women, forensic financial records, and wire fraud evidence across state lines, the DA's office formally charged him with multiple counts of financial exploitation, identity fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. He was arrested in Nevada while trying to use a fake ID to check into a new hotel. When the news broke, it made headlines in 3 different states. For me, the resolution was never about revenge. It was about clarity. I moved into a modern loft, downtown, overlooking Lady Bird Lake. I rebuilt my consulting firm with a renewed focus, not just on cybersecurity, but on relational security. How digital footprints can reveal human behavior long before emotions catch up. I now give seminars to business owners and couples about protecting shared assets, recognizing financial red flags, and having uncomfortable but necessary conversations. I also started seeing someone, Claire, a project manager with a background, in risk assessment. We met through mutual clients. There's no rushing anything. We both carry our own pasts, but we speak honestly. That alone feels like a luxury. One evening, as the sun dipped below the Austin skyline, I looked at the one photo I'd kept from my marriage, our wedding day. Not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. Trust is not something you give and forget. It's something you audit over time, with clarity and care. The life I have now isn't flashy, but it's mine. Built on truth, backed by foresight, and guarded by experience. What happened to Cole isn't rare. It's just rarely talked about. Too often we assume betrayal comes with screaming matches or dramatic exits, but the most dangerous betrayals are the quiet ones, the ones signed in silence, justified by emotion, and covered in just enough charm to make you doubt yourself. Cole didn't respond with rage. He responded with clarity. He didn't confront. He documented. He didn't threaten. He prepared. And that made all the difference. In a world where emotional manipulation can be disguised as love and financial exploitation wears the face of romance, we must learn to protect not just our assets, but our peace. That doesn't mean becoming cynical. It means becoming aware. So maybe the real question this story asks is simple. What would you do if the person you trusted most stopped seeing you as real? And how would you prepare for that answer? If this story made you pause, even for a moment, tell us in the comments. What's one red flag you'll never ignore again? And if you found value here, consider subscribing. Stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're quiet warnings wrapped in real experiences. Let's keep the conversation going. Because awareness isn't paranoia, it's protection.